I'm James Courtney. I'm currently a doctoral researcher here at the University of Birmingham. I work within the Centre for Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Research. I did my undergrad at the University of Bath in chemistry. I then came here and did a Masters in Research in Chemical Engineering, and now I'm applying all that knowledge to research into fuel cells. So the main problem with fuel cells and hydrogen at the moment is that they cost too much. So most of our research is aimed at reducing the cost of these products. My personal research relates to proton exchange membrane fuel cells, and the problem with them is they use an expensive platinum catalyst. We're trying to work out ways of either reducing that platinum catalyst and the amount in the fuel cell, or removing it altogether and using an alternative catalyst. So my research basically encompasses a huge variety of chemistry, chemical engineering and electrochemical engineering. We go right from the fundamentals of electrochemistry, so working out the mechanisms and what actually goes on with the reactions inside a fuel cell, all the way up to developing the products such as fuel cell cars. So the aspects that I investigate during my research are really wide-ranging and really quite interesting. I'm quite a lucky PhD student in that my research is funded by an external company called AKL Energy Limited. The problem with fuel cells and hydrogen is the cost and getting those products into commercialisation. So I'm working with AKL Energy Limited to try and develop their product so that they can actually enter the marketplace. So most of our research within the Centre for Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Research is directly related to industry and developing products based on the theory that we have here in chemical engineering. This allows me to use a huge range of equipment to analyse each of one of those ideas along the way. So when we're looking at individual mechanisms within inside a fuel cell, we might actually be using a free electrode setup on the small scale to investigate those reactions. If we wanted to scale that up a little bit so we can actually start looking at industrial applications, we might start using a single cell test station. This is where we have a single fuel cell and we can test all the different parameters that we've changed within that actual fuel cell. Further to this, when we're actually applying the fuel cells inside a fuel cell car, for example, we use a huge range of data acquisition type technologies to give us data on how that fuel cell is performing. This all comes together and is industrially relevant because they all come up with ideas that we can test here at the university, and then they can go back and redesign their products into the future. So throughout my PhD, the theory that I'm testing is all based on the fundamental principles of chemical engineering and chemistry. A fuel cell is basically an electrochemical device that uses the oxygen reduction reaction and the hydrogen oxidation reaction to produce a current when they're combined together. We investigate how to manage these reactions, so that's involving how we're going to get our reactants to the reaction sites, the temperature that the reactions occur at, and how fast we can make those reactions occur. So this involves looking at the mass transfer of our reactants to the surface of our catalyst, and also the mass transfer of our products away from the surfaces, so we can maximise the current we can generate at these fuel cells. We do this with hydrodynamic control. So we use a channel electrode flow cell to control the transfer, the mass transport of products to a electrode surface, which allows us to then analyse that surface with a very known amount of reactants flowing to it. When we're scaling up these products and actually stacking the fuel cells together to produce a product you might actually use in real life, the reaction we're studying is exothermic, and so the heat management inside that system is really essential to developing them as commercial products. To do this, other people in my group use COMSOL and modelling software to look at the heat transfer across the stack and make sure there's no hot spots, there's no cold spots, and that we don't end up damaging the cell during its operation. A fuel cell wouldn't work without a catalyst at room temperature, and so we need to understand the reactions and the reaction mechanisms that are occurring at that surface. To do this, we design very specific reactors that allow us to control the parameters that catalyst is exerted upon. This means we can actually investigate such things as the diffusion coefficients of reactants to the catalyst surface, the kinetics of that catalyst at that surface, and then the diffusion of our products away from the active site. To do this, we use hydrodynamic control, temperature control, and mass transfer control to actually limit or to very specifically get reactants to that site. That then allows us to analyse the results and to separate out what is a mass transport controlled current versus a kinetically controlled current. We use theory learned in the liquid mixing courses to control electrolytes passing over electrodes. These electrodes have been coated with the catalyst that we use within fuel cells, and by making sure we have a laminar flow across the surface of that electrode, and by knowing exactly the volumetric flow rate across, we can work out the exact mass transport to the surface of the catalyst. This enables us to actually work out the kinetic current that is achieved by that catalyst, or effectively how well that catalyst performs. So one of the problems with hydrogen in fuel cells is that we have to get the hydrogen in the first place. 94% of hydrogen at the moment comes from petrochemicals, and so you could argue that we're not really benefiting carbon emissions by using fuel cells. We're trying really hard to improve that 6% and look at other ways of making hydrogen. But getting that hydrogen to the actual end user is very difficult. How you design a refueling station and how you design the process of producing that hydrogen and getting it to a consumer is very difficult. We recently undertook a study trying to establish a hydrogen refueling network within the northeastern seaboard of the United States. One of the great things about studying a PhD is there's no such thing as a typical experiment. Every day you're waking up and you're trying something new. The whole point of a PhD is to expand human knowledge. So you're not doing typical experiments and you're constantly trying to challenge the theories and concepts that are out there. So on a normal day, I will have come up with a plan of experiments that I'll be likely to run. I work in fundamental electrochemistry, so I will most commonly be using a free electrode cell setup. This allows me to use an electrode which may have been coated with a catalyst, or I might be investigating the catalyst in solution. I will run a series of sweeps and scans using that setup, which allow me to determine how well those catalyst performs. And then I can look at what that catalyst really is and why we've seen the changes in the performance that we have. So during my PhD, I've had a series of quite mixed results. You're constantly testing things that are unknown, so some things just fail and you can't explain why, and other days you'll have a really good result, but again, equally you can't explain why. The best type of results are the ones that you can apply theory to and really understand. So I've been quite fortunate in that I've been able to work with the company that sponsored me and to understand the mechanism that they're using in their products. By doing this, we've been able to talk back to the company and recommend some different types of setups that they can use in their products.